Meet my dad, my first love, my idol.
With Ruzhoff, inspiring you to live an empowered life. So in accordance to Father's Day, I decided to talk about this. I'm going to be talking about briefly my relationship with my dad and generally how dads and their children are, especially in the African society, what kind of relationship they have. So for me, this is going to be like, how do you say that in English? Liebeserklärung, like, how do you say that in English? Oh, I've forgotten how to say that in English. My brain is now thinking German, but also like some kind of therapy. So the relationship with my dad is a complicated one, okay? I love my dad so much, you know, and he deserves all the love. But on some days, I'm not sure what I feel. On some days, I'm angry, you know, and I'll dive into that. So growing up, my dad was very, very loving, very caring, you know, the kind of typical African dad, very providing, does all his jobs and duties that a father should fulfill. Financially, especially, we had a good life. But on the other hand, my dad was also very, very, very authoritarian, like his kind of parenting, you know. So it means like if he said A, it has to be A. There's no compromise, there's no B, there's no C, it's A, you know. So as a child, that was confusing for me. On the one side, to have a very, very loving dad, the kind of dad that I know would die for me, would kill for me, like on a serious note. And then on the other side, the kind of dad that scared me, you know, like it wasn't, I even don't know how to put it into words, but I think most African people or children will understand me. That's why I thought it was important to talk about it. And while I was thinking about it on Father's Day, the reason I decided to talk about it, we've always had, it's common also like on Facebook when people post Father's Day messages, people are like, oh, the Father's Day messages are not as nice as the Mother's Day messages. Or people say, oh, people celebrate their mothers more than their dads. And while I thought about it, I was like, actually, that's true, but also not fair, you know. For example, my dad, I call my mom like every 2 days. I think about my dad every day, but I don't call him every day, you know. And that's something I've had it with for a long time. Like I've asked myself why. You know, there are times my dad calls me, you know, when I take long without calling, he calls me and he's like, why are you so quiet? I want to know if you're fine and all that. And I feel guilty. And I always ask myself, why can't I find it so easy to call my dad like I do calling my mom? And I believe, that's why I said for me, some kind of therapy right now. I believe it is explained by the confusing, complex relationship that I had with my dad, you know. Again, like I said, on the one side, a very, very loving dad, but also very disciplinarian, very authoritative. So let me first talk about like the amazing parts of my dad. Growing up, like we had a good life. Our dad did everything in his power to make sure that we are financially catered for, that we had everything, that we never lacked. He really, really sacrificed a lot. And that I really, really don't take for granted and appreciate a lot. As in, if I was asked to pay my dad back, I would never be able to make it. Like, he spoiled us. Like, we had an amazing life thanks to him. And not because he was a rich man or anything, but he really worked very, very hard, which also impacted us as kids. Like, we are a very, very hardworking people. We have very serious work ethics, which we got from our dad. My dad is a very intelligent man, very driven. And those are things, you know, as a girl, your dad is your first love. Your dad is your role model. So all these things we picked up, and I'm so thankful because I believe a big part of who I am is for my dad. My dad was very humanitarian. I think I've said that in some video, like I have 9 siblings, like official blood siblings. But when I get all together, I have like 20, you know, siblings that my parents just took up, that my parents just supported, you know, go through school and everything. So we really have much more siblings than my blood siblings. And that is also the humanity part that I took up from my parents, and particularly also my dad. My dad, my memories of my dad from, like, let me say, like when I was still very small, I remember like in the mornings before dad went to work, sometimes he would ask us to wish for something. And I remember the one thing we all used to wish for, like we'd say, make a wish, what do you want me to bring in the evening? Unbelievable. When I look back, because my dad was like tough, I'm going to dive into that. So we'd wish for cake. There are special cakes up to now, like when I go to Uganda, even now when we eat cake, you're like, they don't compare anything to the cakes we used to have as kids. Probably they were not a perfect cakes, but that is one of the most beautiful childhood memories. Then for me in particular, I also remember I got to spend to sleep in my parents' bed quite often, because as a child I was scared of the dark. I don't know why. I don't know if I was a cowardly child, but I was I was scared of the dark. I would wake up in the night and cry and scream and call for my mom and for my dad, and most of the time I would end up in their bed. And then, oh my God, I could go on and on when I talk about my dad. Like when we joined high school, we were all in boarding schools, and our dad was the one and only parents that never missed visitation day. Visitation day means when you go to school, you're in school for 3 months. So your parents are accepted to come and visit you, I think once a month, like on a Saturday. And in my case, like I said, we were spoiled, because for me it was a no-brainer. My dad is going to come, it was an obvious. And then while would have other students waiting and praying and hoping that the parents come, and those days we didn't even have mobile handies in school, but I knew my dad was going to come. I don't know how, I think he wrote it somewhere, whatever, but I knew my dad was going to come, and he always came for visitation and brought everything I needed and got pocket money. Like, he really, really showed us love in the best way he knew how. But again, that's the disadvantage that most African parents have. Most African parents show their love through providing, financial support, making sure you go to good schools, making sure you get everything that you need, just like my dad did. But when I compare, for example, my children and the kind of relationship they have with their dad, I sometimes wish we had had that kind of relationship with our dad, the kind of relationship where you just talk about everything and anything, and not look at this person as the boss in the house. I totally understand that is the dynamics in the culture that we grew up in. I'm sure here in Germany, not long ago, it was the same dynamics, like the man was the head and then the rest came after, and what he decided was, holy. But that is unfortunately the disadvantage that the dads have. When the kids get older, of course we loved our dad and we appreciated everything he did. And I still do. I love my dad so much. But the unfortunate bit is I feel close to him, but again, not so close to him. You understand what I mean? Like, there's still that respect. I even joke with my kids and tell them, I still feel my dad. Like, even when we go home visiting, I feel like a little girl again. I'm not sure if, for example, it's okay to do this or to do that. Or like I told you in my video where I said I didn't marry my first love, just go and check it out. I think the title is something like Why I Was Almost 30 Before I Lost My Virginity. Those were the issues. Like, there's some decisions that were entirely made basing on what my dad's reaction would be. Like, I was always scared. I was like, oh, I think my dad won't accept that. Oh, how is my dad going to feel about that? Because he was very authoritative. And that affects the relationship in some way. So I love my dad. I'm close to my dad. But I feel there's a gap, which I find very unfortunate. The kind of gap that doesn't allow me to call him on a daily basis like I call my mom. He would love that. He calls and asks all the time. He would love that. But it's harder for me to call him. And I can't explain that. I can't put into words. If you have the same feeling, please let me know in the comment section. And please also let me know what is your relationship to your dad. So I love my dad. While I think about this video, like, is it a love-hate relationship? No, not that. But all I can say to maybe describe this is, on some days I love my dad, and on some days I'm just angry with him. That's how I'd put it, So it's confusing, and I feel bad for him. And maybe before I go into the general, I would say for all fathers out there, not just African, I think it's important not to just provide for your children materialistically, financially, not be the one to make sure that everything runs, which I appreciate. I mean, if my dad had not done all that, probably wouldn't have had an amazing life. And I'm not saying my mom didn't contribute, but my mom also has her role. Like, she was the emotional support. My mom is our best friend to all of us, my brothers, my sisters, and that puts her at an advantage. Like everyone says, like, the emotional bond I have with her is different from the emotional bond I have with my dad. But when you actually come to balance, you notice that my dad invested as much, if not even more, than my mom. If we say let's balance the scales. But unfortunately, it wasn't on an emotional basis, or better said, he did it like most men do, by showing you through the things they do for you, And I notice how that has affected me as an adult. My love language is I love to get gifts. again, that shows you that's the kind of love that I got from my dad. And since they say your dad is your first love, probably explains why that is my love language. I love getting gifts or presents like through actions, but then I also love. You know what I mean? Like I crave love. When I love someone, I want him to show me, I want him to make me feel loved. I want to feel his love in every fiber of me. And when I love, I give out love, like a lot of emotional love, probably even too much. You know, I love it too deeply. And sometimes I think maybe that is explained from the deficit. That's the emotional love I didn't feel from my dad. But again, I'm able to give out way too much emotional love because I got way too much from my mother. So it's really confusing. But my advice would be for any dads out there, or if you intend to be a dad, and especially in our modern world, we have the opportunity to balance that out. And that's why I don't like the idea or the narrative of everyone saying the men should be the providers, the men should be the leaders, the men should be, you know, the breadwinner. It's not fair. And I feel it's fine and should be okay for the men to let out their feminine side. Feminine side means it should be okay for dads to hug their daughters, their sons, to tell them they love them. I remember we used to hug my dad, like when we'd greet him when we come to school. But it's not the same, you know, the kind of conversations that I had with my mom, I never had with my dad. And when I compare with my kids, they have these all conversations with their dad, okay, more with me, but they also have that kind of relationship. So I really pray and wish that the dads also get the opportunity, not just to provide financially, but also get a very close emotional bonds with their kids, so that when the kids are older, the fathers don't feel isolated. I'm sure my dad sometimes feel lonely without us. You know, he has 10 kids, but sometimes when he calls me or when he sends me WhatsApp messages, it's all about, why don't you call me? Are you fine? Why so quiet? Are you having financial problems? Should I send you money so you can call me? You know, and it makes me feel really bad. So it means he feels lonely sometimes. He feels like he's not connecting with us, and it's not his fault. But as an adult, like I say, I'll do a video about that, how our childhood and our upbringing affects us. So today, oh my God, I've not yet got the word again, but this is for me like a love message on my dad, but also like some kind of therapy. And this being a social empowerment channel, also some encouragement and empowerment for all men out there and for my sons. But I'm doing that job already, raising my kids, knowing that they are okay and should be able to show their feminine side, that it's okay to tell someone I love you. We hug a lot, we talk a lot. So I'm praying and hoping that my sons will be able to create an emotional bond with their children when the time comes. And especially for Africa's fathers, let me know if your experience is different. But most people I've talked to, we all have the same experience. All children from Africa or with an African background, we all have that kind of complicated relationship with our dads. My dad was an amazing dad, but still our relationship is complicated, which makes me sad sometimes, you know. So let me know in the comment section, what is the relationship between you and your dad? Is it a complicated one like mine, or how is it? I'm really curious to know, and what you think about dads and fathers also being able to let out their feminine side, their emotional side. Yeah, so that's it. And that is my Lebenserklärung on my dad. Until next time, my lovelies, check out my other videos, and don't forget to join our family.